let's just sew whatever. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be making the Betsy Bowler from Sew Yours patterns. I am so excited that Melissa sent this over to me. I had just enough time to make this to get it ready for you guys. I am on a trip, so this is pre-filmed, but anyway, this bag is so cute. It has a front pocket here with a flap. It's super cute. It's got a back slip pocket, also with a magnetic snap. I added 2 zipper pulls to make it a double zipper pull. There is just 1 zipper pocket inside, but I think that's fine because you have all the pockets on the outside. But if you wanted, you could add 2 zippered pockets, no problem. Crossbody strap, purse feet. It is finished with binding, so if that's not something you enjoy doing, you might not enjoy this pattern, but I had so much fun making it. The pattern is really well written. There's a lot of great pictures that you can look at, but you can also follow along and make it with me. And make sure you're subscribed before we get started. Definitely check out Sew Yours patterns. They have a huge variety of patterns that are just beautiful. So thank you again, Melissa. I'm gonna quickly go over all of the pattern pieces so that any beginners can take it nice and slow with me. So I have one of my exterior pieces. This is the back exterior. I went ahead and marked the top and bottom centers. I have my zipper panel lining and exterior pieces. There's the exterior and the lining. I have 2 1-inch pieces of waterproof canvas cut for the binding on the inside. I have my bottom gusset lining and exterior, and I went ahead and interfaced that piece as suggested. I have 2 slip pockets. So these are both cut out of exterior fabric. One of these goes on the back of the bag, and one of these goes on the front. I then have my exterior flap piece. This is my lining exterior. This is the top of the exterior, the bottom of the exterior, and then I have my 2 lining pieces. And I have 1 set of zippered pocket pieces. I'm going to be doing my zippered pocket a little bit different from the pattern, but however you choose to do it, it will turn out great. And then I have my crossbody strap, which I cut to the length of the fabric, which is about 54 inches, 56 by 4 inches wide. And then I have the strap connectors, which I cut to 1 inch by 4 inch. 2 inch by 4 inch, but they'll be 1 inch in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and get a fresh bobbin and change my thread color, and then we're going to start on the crossbody strap just to get it out of the way. I am deciding to do snap hooks and a slide adjuster, but the instructions do show a way where you can just attach it directly to the bag. Instead of adding a turn lock to that front pocket or a flip lock, I'm going to just be adding a magnetic snap to both sides of the bag. So one for the flap and then one for the back of the slip pocket. So all of my hardware that I have here is I have 2 1-inch snap hooks, a 1-inch wide mouth slide adjuster. I have 2 1-inch O-rings. I have 2 magnetic snaps, and then I have a set of purse feet and a zipper pull for our zipper. I'm gonna go ahead and cut my zipper tape to about 10 inches. Once I find my scissors. Just a little piece here, and then I'm gonna go ahead and iron the zipper tape so there are no wrinkles. It's not too bad, but you can kind of see some waves. I always like to make sure if I'm not working with a plastic zipper or a metal zipper that I iron it nicely. So for my strap, I am adding 1/2 inch wide double-sided tape down the center. The tape that I'm using right now is from geekyhardware.com. And this one's pretty good. It's not quite as strong as the one from Wawak. That's it. But I like that the paper backing can be ripped, so I don't have to have my scissors. The one from Wawak cannot be ripped at all. The vinyl I'm using is one that I will be carrying on my website. It is a microfiber backed vinyl, and it is so nice to work with. I will be completely honest, I'm not sure how it holds up, but it feels like it's going to hold up really nicely. Doesn't feel thin, but it also doesn't feel like way too thick. So it's a nice happy medium. So I'm going to fold the sides in to the center. There are instructions of how to do a like a pop of fabric strap, which is super cute and I think a great option for domestic machines if you want something that looks a little fancier and is still vinyl but isn't way too thick for your machine to handle. So I love that. I definitely want to try one eventually. You can see this double-sided tape doesn't hold quite as strong as the Wawak one. Wawak? Will I ever say it the same? No. Okay. So I've got my stitch length set to about a 5.5. And I'm just going to fold this in half, going down one side and back up the other. And you just want to make sure that you've got a nice fresh bobbin and that you take the time to line up those sides. I like to start along the edge that needs to be folded over so that that stays in place. And then you can go to the other side. Ben, you need to get down. Get down. Go to your spot. Go on. Go on. Never been pet in your life, have you? All right, so as I get to the end of the strap, I'm going to pivot. Get down. Sorry, Kate baby. So pivot along the bottom and then go to the other side. And then I'm just stabilizing it in place and holding it with my hands. Then you need to go to your spot. Okay. And then what I like to do, Ben, you need to get down, is trim off the excess vinyl at the ends of the strap, just so they're nice and even. And then if you want to, you can add strap ends to it. And then I'm going to grab my hardware pieces to finish the crossbody strap. 1-inch slide, my 1-inch snap hooks. Ben, you need to get down before you even get up. Go on, go to your spot. Go on. Get out of here. Get down. Okay, so you can rivet this in place to secure it. I'm just gonna add like 2 little parallel rows of stitching. The thread that I'm using is also from geekyhardware.com, and it is the Ubi variegated thread. All right, so I'm adding 1 snap hook to the end that is open, looping it through one side, pushing down my slider, and then pulling it through on the other. This glitter vinyl is so, like, it's just pliable. It's so cool. Okay, and then we're going to add this to the other end, and you can add a rivet here if your machine doesn't handle seams very well. I'm just gonna sew a little box stitch. I've got this little scrap of fabric here to help with my walking foot not marking or scratching up my vinyl. As far as leaving feet marks on the vinyl, if you have an industrial walking foot, you can loosen the pressure of your foot, I believe. I know it's one of these two. I think one is the outside feet, one is the inside. And I believe I go over those with Steve from Sewing Gold in the Which Industrial Machine is Right for You video. I would love to go visit him again and do a video of like how to take care of your machine and stuff like that. But that is our crossbody strap all finished, and we're just going to set that aside. All right, and now we're going to work on the side strap connectors. So I'm just folding the long raw edges in towards the center using that double-sided tape. And then I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the outside edge through both sides. I'm going to grab the O-rings. Again, it's one of those things that while you're here, you may as well find a place for all of that hardware. And then you know you're not missing anything. And you can use O-rings or 1-inch simple square rings or the 1-inch triangle buckles. You don't have to use O-rings if you don't want to. I'm going to set these off to the side there, and then I'm going to work on the slip pockets. I'm just going to top stitch both of these while we're here. That is the sound of a machine that needs some oil. So after I top stitch these, I'm going to add some oil. Honestly, it probably needs to just be cleaned. All right. I'm going to press the seam down, fold it over, and I like to save time by cutting my lining side a little bit bigger. So I do what I call a rough cut, and I just kind of roughly cut around the shape because we're going to baste it all together in the end. I'd rather cut out my exterior perfectly and then cut my lining to that perfectly cut exterior. So I'm just finger pressing, rolling that seam all the way out. If you need to iron, you absolutely can. Nothing wrong with it. For my exterior fabric, I am using a water resistant canvas that I have interfaced with a little bit of woven interfacing. Okay, so both of these are going to get a magnetic snap just for the way that I am doing this. However, one is going to go on the exterior, one is going to go on the lining. So you gotta keep that in mind. So this is my back exterior piece, and we know that the magnetic snap gets placed 3 inches and some change from the top. So grabbing my ruler, I believe it was there. So I'm marking the center, and then I'm just gonna lay this in place. Yes, so that looks good. Lining up my center, and then I'm just gonna mark where it should go. It is in the pattern, so keep that in mind. If you're like, well, that's not great. It is in the pattern, so I'm gonna mark the center, and then we'll add the innie side and the outie side of a magnetic snap. And for the magnetic snap, you should have 2 washers, your outie piece and your innie piece. You can also use the KAMSnaps Rivet snaps. I know a lot of people have been enjoying those, and they do seem like a pretty big time saver, I'm not gonna lie. But for regular magnetic snaps, you're gonna take this washer, you're gonna line up where you've marked into the center and mark out the 2 slotted lines that are parallel. And then you're gonna take a seam ripper or an X-Acto knife, whatever you have, and just very carefully make those slits. The innie part is gonna go on to the back side of your panel. And then I like to use this piece to flatten the sides of the magnetic snap as well. I don't think I slit these holes, no. So I would have remembered that. And then the outie piece goes on the other side. If you're using one of the like ultra slim magnets, I really don't think it matters which side is which. So keep that in mind. Right. Then I'm gonna lay that into place, kind of center it out. I'm gonna clip it together. And now if you want to, you can see I've got the excess lining. If you wanted to baste all of your pieces together, trim that away, and then baste these together, that is something you can absolutely do. But I'm just gonna flip it over and baste along my back exterior piece because this bag is finished off with binding, so I don't want a ton of different basting lines to have to cover up with my binding. So I'm just going like 1/8 of an inch from the outer edge, back stitching, and then I'm gonna trim all of the excess away to match the side of, or the size of my back exterior panel. And make sure you trim away as much of your extra threads as possible. And so there is my back slip pocket. And no, I won't add the lining just yet because I like to add my zippered pocket to the back of my bag. So I'm just gonna set that aside for now. Okay, I'm now going to work on the front of the bag. So I've got my flap here. I'm gonna take the lining side of my flap. I'm gonna find the center. And I'm gonna measure about 1.25 inches from the top of the center. And this is where I'm going to put one of my other magnetic snaps. And I'm gonna put the outie on the flap. So I'm gonna grab that washer, line it up in the center, mark out those diagonal lines, and then I'm gonna cut those open. You can add a little bit of fleece or a scrap of interfacing to help stabilize that, if you would like. Okay, Ben, oh my goodness, can you go into your spot and lay down? All right, so then we're going to lay the exterior and the lining of the flap right sides together. And I'm just gonna clip all the way around so it's held in place nicely. Now, hopefully you can see the texture of this vinyl. It does have a little bit of stick on the machine, so what I'm gonna do is flip it over so that I'm not fighting with this material against the base of the machine, the table, I should say. Just gonna go nice and slow around that flap. Back stitch at the start and the stop. And then I'm gonna grab pinking shears to trim that curve. So I'm gonna start right here because I want a little bit of seam allowance on that straight side, just to help reinforce the pocket a bit. So you can see there. Then we're gonna flip this through. And you wanna press against that seam as you go along. And what the pinking shears will help is to, one, it slims down that seam allowance so it's not so bulky, but it'll help the curve sit nicely. And then you just wanna roll it back and forth in between your fingers so that the seam sits nice and straight. And we have to do this when we work with vinyl because we can't use our iron to press it or you will melt your vinyl. So that rolling method really comes in handy. So I'm going to top stitch along the top to close that opening and keep our layers from shifting. And then I'm going to go around the outer edge of this flap. Make sure you go slow around your magnetic snap if you are adding one. And then if you want, you can trim off any excess fabric and thread. Okay. Awesome. So now I'm going to fold this in half to snip the center of the flap. And I'm going to lay that, this is the bottom of my exterior. Lay that centered. Yeah. And then you'll lay the top centered over that as well. I'm going to double check that this is the right way with the instructions because it could be that I have to add it another way and then top stitch it. It's probably right. Okay, good. All of that is correct. We just want to flip all of that up when we top stitch so that the flap is a little more perky. It's kind of like the zipper panel situation where you've got your depressed or your perky zipper panel. So, going to sew all of that together. And then we're going to flip this up. And so what that does is make it so that your flap wants to go up, if that makes sense. Now, if we top stitched it this way, you can see your flap is automatically gonna wanna go down. So by doing it this way, it makes it so that when it's closed, when you unsnap it, it opens so that you can get what you need to get a little bit easier than this way, where if you unhook it, you have to lift it up as well. So kind of an interesting thing to take into consideration. So we're gonna top stitch under and through all those layers. And then I'm gonna grab my slip pocket piece, laying that in place, and it should be just slightly under where those seams connect. I'm gonna lay this down to mark where my other magnetic snap should go. And I'm gonna do that by taking my silver marking pen, do quite a big glob on the center of my magnetic snap. Oop. Make sure everything is in place. And then I'm going to close the flap and press down. And it's like a little stamp. You can kind of see there. So it may be a little off from the center, but that's okay. I can use that as a guide to then mark where I need my other snap to go. Gosh darn it. I'm missing a washer, I think. That's why I have an extra bag, because when I grab hardware for myself, I don't count things properly. Bed in the corner. Too funny. All right, so then we'll move our lining out of the way, mark out the center there. There are measurements given in the pattern for where these should be placed if you're using a flip lock. So if you're following along the pattern, you'll know those measurements. The lid on. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is lay this back in place. And when I'm clipping this down, I'm clipping it with my clip here upside down. And that's because I'm going to do what we did on the exterior, which is baste everything in place from with the lining side, or the wrong side up, I should say. I'm gonna double check that my flap closes nicely. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. And you can see how it wants to lift up. I mean, it'll start to rest a little flatter, but for now I'm gonna leave it up and baste along the other side. Trim down all of the excess. Now I did not add a nameplate. Oh, there's plastic over the snap. I was like, it's not closing very well. There's plastic over it. Good. Ah, that's what I was waiting for. Let's see. I could always add a little nameplate to the other side. Just didn't want it to clash with this fabric. It's so pretty. So maybe I'll just do a sew on label. These are from the Heartwood and Hide. They're so gorgeous. Got some cork ones. Might be kind of fun to add like a black one. Well, yeah, I love the idea of a black label on this. Just to kind of like pop and tone it down a little bit more. So maybe feels like too much on the front of the bag. I can add it to the back. Yeah, I'm gonna add it to the back. That feels nice. So I'm gonna fold it in half, marking out the center. I'm gonna take a little bit of double-sided tape, stick that down. Kind of eyeball where it looks nice. And then I'm gonna switch my stitch length down to a 4 and just go nice and slow around the label. And then what I'm doing with the back stitch lever is kind of picking where I want my needle to end up. So I've got the lever in one hand and my wheel in the other to help me line up exactly where that stitch is going to go. And then I'll pull these threads to the back. All right, so while I'm here, I can go ahead and baste the lining piece to the exterior front because I'm not adding any kind of zippered pocket or anything like that. So I'm going to line up all of the center notches and baste along all of that. I'm going to switch my stitch length out to like a 6. I don't need this to be close together, and the longer your stitch is, the quicker it's going to go. And then I can trim down those layers to be exact. So I've got a little bit of lining popping through on some sides, and that's because just like my slip pockets, I roughly cut out the lining. I mean, I cut it a little bit closer, but I didn't try to do it exactly perfect because I knew I'm just going to be basting it all together anyway. So you want to make sure that there's an even distance between all of the layers because we're going to be adding binding to this. So you don't want a lot of excess to just get you confused. So I'm going to be adding a zippered pocket. I don't do the facing method that is shown in the pattern, although it is a great method, especially if you don't want any raw edges in your zipper pocket. Okay, so I'm just taking my zipper pocket ruler for a 7-inch zippered pocket, and I'm going to lay one piece over top of my lining. I'm going to center this out. So I have this center crease and this center crease, and I'll just lay right sides together. I'm going to use these clips to help hold that in place. My stitch length, I'm going to set to like a 4.5 back stitch, and I just do 2 parallel lines, but you can sew the whole box if you want. You can pull your threads to one side. I'm going to cut this open. Snipping out to the corners. And then pull this through to the back side. So it's at the wrong side of the fabric. And then I'm very carefully going to iron this. If you've ever worked with waterproof canvas, you know that sometimes it melts if you iron it for too long. I have not had that happen with waterproof or with water resistant canvas, so keep that in mind. But I'm gonna just get a little steam on this so it's nice and malleable. All right, so I've got my zipper that I ironed pretty well. You can see it's still wrinkly. I'm gonna iron it again. All right, that's a little better. You can use double-sided tape to help you hold this in place, or a glue stick. I just hold it and go. But I have done thousands of zipper pockets in my lifetime, so no shame in the tape game. Okay. And I always cut my zipper tape really long, and then before I close it up, I just push my zipper pull in, and now I know that my zipper teeth are lined up just perfectly, you know? And I don't have to move my pull out of the way or anything like that. And then I'm gonna cut off all of my threads. Where's my thread zapper? Use this to kind of seal those threads. That was nice. That was nice. Thank you, PJ, for reminding me about how much I love that thing. Trim off my excess zipper tape. I still want it to be within the seam allowances of the zipper pocket so that the zipper tape for any reason doesn't start to fray. But I am going to sew as close to this area as possible so that I don't have to add my binding through that seam. So yours might look different if you're following the cut directions of the pattern, etc. Yeah, I'm just gonna follow around the zipper box as close as possible. And then we're not birthing this bag through any hole or anything like that, so we don't need to leave anything open. This bag is definitely possible to be made with a birthing method. You would just want to make sure to follow a different kind of video for that. I think I have a ton of videos, but Jessica from Sodakine, she has a video about how to do it best, really, honestly. It is more complicated, that's for sure. All right, so I am clipping all these layers together. To baste my lining and my exterior lining. Hello, how are you? And I'm just just gonna follow my existing line of stitching as close as possible. And again, switching my stitch length to about a 6. I'm going to trim down any excess threads and any excess fabric that doesn't quite match. So I chose not to add any extra interfacing to these panels other than the one layer of woven, because this waterproof canvas adds a lot of bulk, so I don't feel it's necessary. This right now feels really sturdy. So that's why I didn't. We're now going to work on our gusset. We're getting there. So I'm gonna lay the straight edges touching each other or facing each other. And I'm gonna put double-sided tape along that side so that I know that's where that goes. That is where my zipper gets placed. Oh yeah, I need 2 more zipper pulls. What is wrong with me? I thought 1 zipper didn't seem like enough. And then for my lining panels, I just cut them as rectangles, and I will trim them down to match the size, because waterproof canvas always tends to kind of bulk up in the seams. So your lining side, if you were to have cut it the exact same size, ends up a little smaller for some reason, just because when you fold it over, it adds a little height, I guess. So let me get my zipper ready. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it to about 18 to 19 inches. I want that overhang so that I can move my zipper pulls completely out of the way, and it just makes it so much easier. All right, my zipper is ready. My zipper pulls are attached. If you are worried about this coming undone, you can baste stitch. Just add a few rows of stitching over the teeth, and then your zipper pulls definitely won't go anywhere. You can also just add like a clip, but just be careful. All right, so I'm gonna peel off paper on one side, lay my zipper in place, and then I'm gonna grab one of my lining pieces and line up all of those together. I did cut my lining a little bit longer, so I'm gonna trim that down now. Like literally just the teeniest bit longer. Tape stuck to me. I'm using a 3M tape. I think I got it from Amazon. It's not my favorite. I definitely prefer the Geeky Hardware 1/8" wide double-sided tape. But I will say I have not tried the Wawak 1/8" wide double-sided tape, so I don't know for sure. I'm going to add a little bit of steam to the lining portion, help lay that flat, nice and malleable, and then I'm going to flip it over and top stitch both sides. And you want to make sure that you're being really careful when you do that, that you don't hit any of the vinyl up here. Okay, my stitch length is at about a 5. It was a little bit bigger, which isn't what I want. And you want to make sure that you're rolling that seam so that everything is sitting nicely. You don't want your underside fabric to be over too far, and then your zipper pull could get caught in it. So you want to make sure you're rolling that seam so it's sitting nicely. Kind of pulling on it and then flattening it. So you can see how nicely that sits there. I don't want to do one poorly to show the difference, but just keep in mind. Okay, so I'm going to lay this down, lining up the straight edges like that. Make sure these are lined up. And then I'll flip it over, give it another good press. Make sure that your zipper tape stays nice and straight without you moving it a little bit too much. That's what my Ouija board hand sticker is kind of representing, is you want to use a very light touch when it comes to zipper tape. Otherwise, you'll end up with a wonky zipper. Trimming my little bit of excess lining fabric and repressing. Make sure your zipper pulls are out of the way and not going to be under your foot. Now for my industrial machine, I do have walking or zipper feet for it, but I don't find I ever really need to use them. I can get close enough with my walking foot. So I'm gonna go ahead and iron this again. And then I'm going to press this open. And I guess this can kind of help you see. You want this seam here to stay flat and you want to press this over, but if you were to pull it too far, you can see how it's further underneath on the lining side than it is on the top, but you want them to be right on top of each other. So pulling both at the same time and then flattening that seam along the zipper can really help things line up nicely. So I'm pulling the lining fabric from underneath and pressing it all back on top. It's more complicated than it seems. Definitely not something that you just like know, but it makes your zipper sit so nicely. So I'm going to bring my zipper pulls into the center, and then I'm going to grab my strap connectors. I'm going to lay them over with a little bit of overhang. I would say I've got about a finger width from where I'm about to tack it down to the hardware. So base that in place over the center of the zipper. And repeat that on the other side. So it's within my seam allowance about an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch. As you can see there. And so what I'm gonna do now is just baste curved side of that zipper panel to the lining, trimming the excess thread. And now, instead of making sure that I get my lining and my exterior perfectly lined up, I was able to focus more on this center seam, and I can just trim down the excess lining, which I might have had to do anyway, you know. So it's nice that binding, there's pros and cons to binding, but I like that binding lets you focus more on other parts and less on other parts. I don't know. Whoops. Move that clip. All right, so now we're gonna add the purse feet to the bottom of the bag. And I've got my centers marked on the gusset. So I'm just gonna make a straight line. I interfaced my gusset with 1 layer of Sofuse Plus for the whole thing, and then 2 layers, so a total of 3 layers of Sofuse Plus at the bottom. So that makes it sturdy, but not too stiff. So I like it. So I believe the pattern gives measurements for where to add those purse feet. So defer to that for this part. I am gonna go ahead and add all 5 just because I have them, and why not? And then I'm gonna add some duct tape over the purse feet to protect my hands and keep them in place a little bit better, I guess. So I'm using my seam ripper to mark where the purse feet go through. And you want to make sure that your lines are all going in the same direction so that placing them in is a lot easier. There's also Rivet purse feet, the like bucket purse feet. I know SiahSwag carries them and KAMSnaps carries them. Okay, so they're all in place. And then what I'm gonna do is turn them so they're nice and tight against the hole we placed them in. And then adding that washer and securing them down. You want to make sure that the posts are not anywhere near your seam allowance, because that would be bad. And I try to make it so that my duct tape is within a seam allowance so it doesn't lift over time. Because I can just trim that off. But you want to make sure that your machine can sew through duct tape if you're doing that. So I'm gonna just secure the tape and then trim off the excess on the sides there. Okay, so now we're going to attach the exterior panel bottom to the exterior panel top. I'm gonna clip this together at the exterior. I'm gonna flip it over and add my lining. And I believe this is a 3/8 inch seam allowance. My stitch length is still at about a 5. You might want to use a 4 or 5 for this and go slow over that strap connector. And I'm going to repeat that on the other side, making sure that there are no twists in your fabric. With those edges. And now for top stitching the side panel, I'm only going to sew through my exterior. So I'm going to leave my lining face down and I'm going to push down the exterior panel. And what this does for me is if my lining is off in any way, I've got a little bit of room to swoosh it from one side or the other. Going nice and slow over that strap connector. Got some extra threads I can snip away. And then I'm just gonna carry over that seam to the other side. Are we out of bobbin yet? Not yet, okay. So that's what it's looking like. And then you can flip your lining into the exterior. Again, you want to make sure there are no flips, you know, nothing's turned a weird way. And I'm going to use a bunch of clips to hold all of these layers together, starting in the center. And then I'm going to lay it down towards one side, clipping together. And then lay it down towards the other side, clipping those together. And I don't feel any issue of an uneven lining versus exterior. So what we're gonna do is just top stitch and top stitch, basting those into place. Got some extra thread. So I'm gonna switch my stitch length to like a 6.5. I want it to be nice and wide. It's so exciting when all that's left in my project bin is the binding. I'm like, yes, we are near the end. And we want to trim off any of that lining fabric and then all of our extra little threads. Okay, so now I can put all of my little hair clips back in their container. I'm not going to need those anymore today. I'm going to need stronger clips. All right, we are now ready to attach the gusset to the exterior of our bag. I'll go ahead and I've got all these little spare threads. You know what I could do is I could thread zap them out of the way. A little thread zapper. Perfect. Okay. Now, really quick, I'm going to fold this in half and mark the centers I already have my bottom center marked, but I just want to double check that that is still correct. And it is, but I don't have my top centers marked. So I just want to fold that in half, grab my precision snips, and snip it out a little bit better. Alright, so I'm going to start with my exterior. I feel like it's going to be a little bit trickier with this flap. I don't think the flap is too close to the outside edges, but it might give us a little bit of grief, you never know. So lining up the center notch, clipping that in place. I like to add about 3 clips along a side, and then I'm going to flip this and then line up the bottom center and add a couple clips there. And now what you could do, if you feel confident that your layers are going to match up, is you can add a super quick line of basting. I'm going to switch my stitch length back to a 5 and just add where I already basted. Like, I'm not adding anything extra. I just want to add a quick little line. Instead of like using staples, you know, it's kind of what this is helping me to achieve, is just keeping all those layers together while I focus on the curves. I'm also going to need to change that bobbin here in a minute. Okay. So that's not going anywhere, which is great. Now I can focus on clipping together these curves. And if you need to, you can add little notches or clips into those curves. And I may need to for this corner. So when you're doing that, you want to be really careful not to go too far. I'm basically just like relieving any tension. You can see how much easier it is to press that. It's kind of like adding vertebrae, I don't know, but it just moves a little bit easier. But you want to make sure that you're not snipping any further than where you're going to be adding binding. Oh, this bag is so cute. And then I feel like it's going to be up to you which direction you sew this, because technically you could go round that way. I just never know. I feel like I usually lay it flat this way, so that's what I'll do. And then again, I'm just adding little notches, buenos notches. Around that gusset, just so when I'm pushing down, it helps fan it out. I really don't do this enough. I should do it more, because it is a super helpful trick. Okay, I'm going to change the camera angle so you can see a little bit easier. Okay, my stitch length is at about a 5, and I'm going to start at the bottom where I have already basted everything together. Oh, I should have changed that bobbin. We'll get it in a second. I feel like I've already committed. You want to make sure that you're stitching past where you've snipped into those layers. So now that I've done the one, I'm gonna go ahead and do a time lapse for the rest. Okay, so that side is done. I can check from the outside to make sure I caught all the layers and there's no awkward puckering or anything. It looks good. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my binding now. I always find it easier to just do it as I go. Maybe it's not, I don't know. And then whatever side you have face up, you want to clip it from that direction, and then on the back side you want to make sure that you add a little bit extra binding to. You can of course do more traditional binding where you sew it wrong sides together, flip it over, and then sew it down. It's a little cleaner looking. You would need more than a 1-inch cut of waterproof canvas if you're doing that way. I do not cut the waterproof canvas on the bias because there is no stretch any way you slice it. Got a couple more clips. Sorry, didn't mean to bitch slap you there. Okay. And then folding all of that down. And we know we have a nice fresh bobbin. And then as I'm attaching the binding, I'm going nice and slow. I like to use the clips to press the binding back against the fabric, but I know some people will use a little screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, or a stiletto tool. All of those work great if they work for you. Something you can add to this pattern is another slip pocket, but keep in mind that it's going to bulk up these side seams where we're adding the binding. But I think the bag has quite a bit of pockets already, so I don't know that it has to have another. Just brainstorming if you like pockets. And then just do a quick double take to see if you missed anywhere. I've got a little space here I missed. So I'm just gonna sew around the outer edge again. And hey, maybe a stiletto would make it so I don't do that. You never know. I guess you do know if you sew them perfectly every time. Anyway, okay. So now I'm gonna go ahead and work on the other side. Before I get started sewing it together, I'm just gonna add those little snips. I'll go ahead and time lapse the next side just because I hate to not include it. But I'm adding those snips, the curve of the gusset. So that it sits nicely. Oh, so cute. All right, so I successfully used the screwdriver around the curves and it actually really helped keep all those pieces together, so that's exciting. So this bag has a lot of stand-up strength, as you can see, because of that binding. So we're gonna turn this bad boy right side out. For sure I'd be able to do it the other way. Incorrect. So I like to push on a corner first, and then you can add your whole hand, really punch out the corners of the bag. That's not too bad. I don't know if the 3 layers of Sophie's Plus on the bottom was maybe too much. But you just want to press against the binding to get the seam nice and set into place. And just like all the other ones, if you kind of roll it back and forth, that'll help situate everything. And then push along the top. I can go ahead and zip my zippered pocket. You can see that perky pocket is already in action, so we'll just close that bag up. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. So I always like to make it a double zipper pull because it's super easy when you're using zipper tape to do that. Let's go ahead and add the strap. All right, and here is the bag all finished. I feel like it needs little handles or something, so you may even be able to add like a little handle in the seam, but it would add a lot of thickness, so it's totally up to you. I was a little worried about this zipper panel having that like shape to it, but it honestly really helps to let all the layers sit nicely, so I think it turned out so good. I don't know that the magnet, let's say you decided not to add the magnet back here, I don't think it's super necessary, at least for the materials I used, only because it's not going to stretch out and lean open, but it is more secure with that magnetic snap, so I think that's a nice touch. And then you can make it so that the strap is fixed to that O-ring or simple square ring if you wanted. And then we've got our perky pocket here, just so cute. I love that. And you could even, if you wanted to make it simple, just add like a zippered panel to that portion. But I really think that it's such a statement to add that front pocket piece. So that is the Betsy bowler bag. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you check out the pattern as well as some of the other patterns from Sew Yours. And I will see you all later. Bye.